They are among the most secretive people in all Middle-earth. While they would have dealings with hobbits, men, and even elves, there were things that the dwarves would not reveal to others, including their language, their names, and even their women. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover the secrets of the dwarves. Perhaps the biggest secret of the dwarves is their language itself. In spoken and written forms, and, as we'll see later, even sign language. Their written and spoken language is known as khazad-dum, and it was devised for them by none other than Aule, the smith of the Valar who created their race. Being created by one of the Valar, it does not share an origin with any form of Elvish. Because of this and the dwarves' natural secrecy, very few non-dwarves ever successfully learned khazad-dum. Where we do find some minor similarities with khazad-dum is in some of the early Mannish languages. For the Edain, as they made their way on the long journey from the far east to Beleriand, would come into contact with dwarves in Rhûn, Rhovanion, and the Blue Mountains. As a result, we can see some dwarven influences on the later languages of Adunaic of Numenor and its derivative Westron or Common Speech. Still, the dwarves would be incredibly secretive about their language in all its forms, which even extends to their own names. Every well-known dwarf name, from Gimli to Thorin to Balin son of Fundin, is not a khazad-dum name. These are simply names they take in the northern Mannish tongue. Whether they are translations of their true names or completely unrelated, we have no indication. Even the greatest of the dwarves, Durin, is a Mannish name meaning king. Ironically, one of the only names we know of in khazad-dum is the name of the dwarves' creator. We are told in the Silmarillion that they call him Mahal, meaning the maker. So secretive are the dwarves regarding their names that they did not even engrave their true names upon tombs in their own realms. We see this when the Fellowship finds Balin's tomb. There they find runes in two languages. In khazad-dum, Balin Fundinul, Uzbad Khazad-dumu, as well as its translation in the Common Speech, Balin son of Fundin, Lord of Moria. Gandalf notes that the same thing is written in the tongues of men and dwarves. But how much khazad-dum does Gandalf know? Is he one of the few that learned this secret language? In all likelihood, he is not. While he seems to be able to recognize this particular translation, or simply knows their practice of writing on tombs, he says earlier outside the doors of Durin, "I once knew every spell in all the tongues of elves or men or orcs that was ever used for such a purpose. I can still remember 10 score of them without searching in my mind. But only a few trials, I think, will be needed, and I shall not have to call on Gimli for words of the secret dwarf tongue that they teach to none. The opening words were elvish, like the writing on the arch, that seems certain." While he would not need Gimli's secret dwarf tongue for the doors, the fact that he mentions this clearly indicates Gandalf is not by any means fluent in the language. Gandalf notably leaves out dwarves on his list of knowing every spell in all the tongues of elves, men, and even orcs. Another interesting fact about khazad-dum is that it changes very little over the centuries and millennia of the ages. Aule taught the language to the 7 fathers of the dwarves, and after their awakening in scattered places, their languages would diverge somewhat in their separation from one another. However, it is said that the changing of the language was so slow that even in the Third Age, conversation among different dwarves was easy. Contrast this to men, who in this same amount of time would have languages like Adunaic, Common Speech, Hobbitish, and Rohanese, all derive from the same language of the original men. Tolkien describes the difference saying, "The change in khazad-dum as compared with the tongue of the elves, and still more with those of men, was like the withering of hard rock compared with the melting of snow." Tolkien tells us more about the dwarves and their secret language in the Peoples of Middle-earth. The dwarves were in many ways a special case. They had an ancient language of their own, which they prized highly. And even when, as among the long-beard dwarves of the West, it had ceased to be their native tongue and had become a book language, it was carefully preserved and taught to all their children at an early age. It thus served as a lingua franca, that is, a common language, between all dwarves of all kinds. But it was also a written language used in all important histories and lore, and in recording any matters not intended to be read by other people. This khazad-dum, as they called it, partly because of their native secretiveness, and partly because of its inherent difficulty, was seldom learned by those of the other race. Now, we've repeatedly established the fact that khazad-dum was very rarely known by members of other races. The most well-known and well-established of these characters is Curufin, son of Feanor. While most of his brothers were too occupied with war and feuds, Curufin, said to be his father's favorite, was most interested in the language of the dwarves. He's one of the few Noldor to win friendship of the children of Aule, and we are told it was from him that the lore masters obtained such knowledge as they could of the khazad-dum. This knowledge, no doubt, being what we learn of khazad-dum in the Silmarillion. While the most famous of dwarves are known by their mannish names, there are a few we actually know in khazad-dum. We get the trio of petty dwarves in the tale of Thorin Turambar, Mim, Ibun, and Khim. We also know the great smith, Gamil Zarak, as well as the Lord of Belagost, Azagal. While the secret nature of khazad-dum means we don't know many of their meanings, it is believed Azagal means warrior. The dwarves also gave a khazad-dum name to an incredible elf, as Galadriel's brother Finrod is called Felaggundu, hewer of caves. Later, in the Third Age, the dwarves would call Gandalf Tharkun, meaning gray man or staff man. Aside from people, we know the names of a scattering of places. Places such as khazad-dum, meaning dwarves' mansions. Mazarbul, the chamber the Fellowship discovers, whose name means records. Azanabulzar, the dwarven name for the Dimral Dale. Barazinbar, meaning Redhorn, the dwarf name for Karatras, the Redhorn Pass. Sharbund, the Bald Hill, for the First Age location of Aman-Ruth. Narag-Zaram, a name for Lake Helivorn in the First Age. Keled-Zaram, meaning glass pool, the dwarven name for the Miromir. And the dark land of Mordor is known as Nargun, and the vile orcs are called Ruks or Rakas. And of course, perhaps most famous of all, we have the battle cry, Baruk Khazad, Khazad I Menu, axes of the dwarves are upon you. But as I alluded to earlier, it was not only the dwarves' written and spoken language that was secret. The dwarves, it turns out, also had a sign language. This language, known as Iglishmek, is said to have been far more elaborate than the Elvish sign language of Matengwe. Now we're going to take a real quick, real deep dive into Tolkien lore here to talk about Dwarven Sign Language. This comes in the linguistic journal Venyar Tengwar. And here we find some writings that were left out of the History of Middle-earth volume War of the Jewels, but that Christopher Tolkien allowed to be published in this academic journal. Now within this essay and its notes, we get our sole 2 examples of Iglishmek. So they are slightly raising the right forefinger, followed by slightly raising the left forefinger, means I'm listening. Doing both at the same time means a command, which is listen. So listen, I've got more secrets of the dwarves. But perhaps the most closely guarded secret of all among the dwarves was their women. So secret are they that we have the name of only one throughout their entire history, Dis, the sister of Thorin Oakenshield. Dis, we are told, is recorded due to the valiant deaths of her sons, Fili and Kili, in the Battle of Five Armies. Among the reasons dwarf women are so protected is their scarcity. According to Gimli in the appendices, dwarf women make up no more than 1/3 of their population. In part due to the rarity of the women, dwarven numbers increase slowly. This is compounded by the fact that not all dwarf women take husbands, for some do not wish to marry, and others desire a husband they cannot have and so take no other. Even among dwarf men, there are many who do not desire marriage, for these dwarves are so engrossed in their crafts. Dwarves are also known to only ever take one spouse in their life, never remarrying. All of these factors contribute to the secrecy surrounding their women. As a people who multiply slowly, they are disproportionately affected by loss in war and the peril that comes with having no secure dwellings. So we can imagine how impactful the loss of their homes is, as we see in places like the Blue Mountains, khazad-dum, the Grey Mountains, and Erebor. Still, it was not unheard of for dwarf women to travel abroad, though it was only done so at great need. In voice and appearance, dwarf women are incredibly similar to dwarf men. It was even written at one point that dwarves, both male and female, are born with beards. And when traveling, the women would dress in similar attire to the men, so as to become indistinguishable in the eyes of other peoples. So effective was this strategy that among human men, it was rumored that there were no dwarf women, and that dwarves instead grew out of stone. There would of course be other secrets when it came to the dwarves, most notably the secret entrance to the Lonely Mountain. This back door seeming to be made in a similar manner to the famed Doors of Durin at the west gate of Moria. Whether their doors, language, or 1/3 of their population, we can be certain the dwarves kept these secrets out of great care and protection of their people. A people marked by fierce loyalty, working to preserve their lives and their kingdoms over the many generations of their kind. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil 19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, CCDC Red Team, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Swirled Traveler, Matthew Jeffrey, Viking Lord, Alvin Einbert, Jeremy Daniel Derby, Madame Director, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Z and N, Evely, Kia, Freya Firestar, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.